All right. Okay. All right. So for anyone on here who I have not had the chance to meet yet, my name is Mary Margaret Busby, and I'm president of the PRAM Central chapter. Very much looking forward to when we can actually all meet again in person. Not exactly sure when that's going to be, but I promise y'all as soon as we get out, we will also let y'all know. All right. So that being said, if Jean Cook, our VP of membership, if you recognize any new members we've had since the last meeting, that would be great.
Okay, great. We've had 2 new members join since our last meeting. Charlene Williams from the Mississippi Board of Pharmacy and Leah Robinson from Tougaloo College. I just went through the participants. I didn't see their names. I don't know if their numbers are here. But if you're here and you want to say hello, say hello. If not, we'll welcome you when we can all be together again.
And get your certificate. Thank you, Jean. Mara, Career Development Coordinator, if you have announcements.
Well, I'd just like to remind everyone that we do still have members who are going through the APR process, and certainly if anyone out there is interested in COVID-19 is not stopping us. So we have gotten permission from the UAB, that's the Accreditation Board, to have Zoom presentations if we want to do it that way, a panel presentation. And of course, it's a small enough group that I believe we could socially distance if someone preferred that. But it shouldn't stop you. And in fact, I think that's an added incentive if you're concerned about finances and the travel that might be involved with doing a panel presentation, perhaps outside of your hometown. And since we're not having our PRAM, in-person meeting, that Zoom may be a very cost-effective way of doing that. So if you have any interest in pursuing your APR, I'd love to hear from you. Just shoot me an email and I'm here to support you in any way I can.
Thank you, Mara. All right, do we have any other members who'd like to make any announcements? Or any other PRAM members, even if you're not with Central Chapter, if you have anything you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from y'all as well. Anybody has anything? I know we don't really have all the events to invite each other to as much these days, unless they are virtual. Little shout out to Matt Martin with State PRAM for keeping us all aware of all the other chapters meetings. So that's been really helpful. All right, so Bill, if you want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, I'm going to mute everybody. So then, all right. There we go. All right, Bill, so if you want to unmute yourself and yeah, go ahead and introduce Brett Carr.
All right, well, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Brett Carr. And Brett is with the FBI office here in Jackson. Brett began his career with the FBI in May of 2016 as a public affairs officer in our Jackson, Mississippi field office. In this role, he manages public affairs for the FBI in Mississippi, ranging from media relations and community outreach to congressional affairs. Brett graduated in 2009 from USM with a BA in journalism with an emphasis in public relations. Prior to joining the FBI, he worked for the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency as a public information officer from January 2010 to December 2011, and then again in 2012, he went back and he worked for another 4 years or so there. During his time at MEMA, he worked numerous local, state, and federal disasters, coordinated external affairs for the agency from the office on scene and managing the state's Joint Information Center. Very interesting work. During his time away from MEMA, he lived in Wake Forest, North Carolina, where he worked in the public affairs office for Wake County. He was also a firefighter, interestingly enough, for the Poplarville and Bay St. Louis fire departments from 2005 to 2009. And he lives in Madison with his wife and 2 daughters. So y'all please help me welcome Brett Carr.
Hello, everyone. I think you now know everything there is to know about me, so here we go. All right. So I have a few things to talk about today. You know, talking to this group is a little bit different than the normal chats that I do, simply because, you know, I'm normally talking to people who don't know anything about dealing with the media or public relations in general. So, but first I want to thank you for having me here today. It's a little different doing this via Zoom than what we're used to, right? I think I've been part of some PRAM meetings in the past, and those are normally in person, like at the Capitol Club or something. So this is a little bit different. I am doing this at home. Our security requirements are crazy, so we can't do this type of thing in the office. So I said, forget it, I'll just do it at home. All of this is unclassified. There's nothing to worry about on my end. So I said, I'll just do this from home. So again, thank you for the honor to speak with you all. You know, you are a group of professionals that probably know more about all of this than I do. But I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about my job. So I can neither confirm nor deny whether I work for the FBI. So that's really all that I can tell you today. So I'm just gonna have to go now. So good talk. Nice. I'm kidding. So it seems like that's really all that I ever say. And I know if you have paid attention to anything in the news in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been there, it's pretty much always Brett Carr could not comment, or Brett Carr couldn't say anything. So there's reasons for that. We may touch on it a little bit later, but there are always a lot of things that we can talk about. Today I'm going to kind of outline the FBI in general, how we're set up worldwide. Also kind of talk a little bit about FBI public affairs, talk about FBI here in Mississippi. I'll tell you about my typical day, which is a joke because typical means nothing because no days are the same. And I'm sure each one of you can relate to that. And then at the end, we'll take some time for questions and I'll answer as many questions as I can. So let's talk a little bit about the FBI in general. So the FBI is headquartered up in DC. We have about 37,000 employees worldwide. We have about 14,000 of those are special agents. So special agents are the ones that carry the guns and, you know, get to wear the vest and the cool jacket and all that kind of stuff. Some 23,000 employees are not gun-toting, cool jacket-wearing people. I am not a gun-toter or a cool jacket-wearing person. We do also have intelligence analysts. That falls into the same category as the professional support. And professional support means everything from our budgeting folks, our accounting folks, our public affairs officers, all the way up to our FBI director is not a sworn FBI law enforcement officer. So, you know, the support piece of what we do is very important, but we don't get the glory, right? The agents get the glory. And that's okay because they're the ones that might get shot at. Hopefully that doesn't happen to me. So like I said, our headquarters is up in Washington, D.C. It's in the J. Edgar Hoover building. If you've never been to that area, I encourage you to go. The J. Edgar Hoover building is very interesting architecturally. It's actually probably the ugliest building in D.C. The rumor is, the word is, when J. Edgar Hoover, when they were building or getting ready to build the J. Edgar Hoover building, they showed J. Edgar the plans, and he was pretty close to death at that point, 1972-ish, I believe. And he said, that's the ugliest building I've ever seen. Whatever you do, don't name it after me. So what did they do? They named it after him. So there's talks about actually tearing it down and rebuilding because it's too small and kind of outdated for what we need. So I don't know what they're going to do. They've been working on that for 5 years. They talked about moving. They talked about tearing it down. I don't know what the word is today. I think right now they're talking about tearing it down. So we'll see what happens with that. But I do encourage you to go up there. There's a museum that is open to the public. You can go in and check that out. It's actually very interesting. There are actually a lot of artifacts from here in Mississippi, from the civil rights era and different things from Mississippi. So if you get an opportunity, go check it out. We have 56 field offices. The FBI has 56 field offices in the 48 contiguous states, Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. Those offices are our main offices that work the investigations in the field. Of course, here in Jackson, we're headquartered in Jackson. And I'll get into kind of Mississippi here in just a few minutes and how we're laid out. We also have 63 what we call legal attaches. Those are offices in other countries, Canada, Mexico, all the way around the other side of the world, China, Japan, China, you know, you name it, we have an office there pretty much, 63 different countries. We then have 380-ish satellite offices within the United States. So there's a lot of different places that we have people, a lot of different offices, a lot of different things going on all around the world every day. So let's talk a little bit about the FBI mission. It's pretty simple. Our mission is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution of the United States. Pretty cut and dry. We have a list of priorities and other things that are kind of lined out that dig a little deeper than that. But as far as our day-to-day mission, protect the American people, uphold the Constitution of the United States. Pretty simple. So what do we investigate? The FBI actually has the broadest legal investigative jurisdiction of any federal law enforcement agency. Some 400 federal statutes that we investigate, everything from civil rights to terrorism, counterintelligence to cybercrime, public corruption, violent crime, white collar, healthcare fraud, weapons of mass destruction. I'm just naming a few. So we do pretty much everything on all different levels, and it's sometimes crazy to just try to keep up with everything that we do, even here in Mississippi. Your mind would be blown if you knew exactly what we dealt with here on a daily basis. So now let's kind of roll into the big picture of the FBI Office of Public Affairs. So that again is headquartered up in Washington, D.C. We have several offices that fall under the Office of Public Affairs. The National Press Office, of course, they're dealing with national media and large news incidents and stories. The Investigative Public Affairs, Investigative Publicity and Public Affairs Unit, they're the ones that help make the wanted posters, the top 10. They work with all of the publications and documentary groups. Basically, if it's not hard news, what we call IPPAU, Investigative Publicity and Public Affairs Unit, they're doing all of that type of stuff. So authors that are writing books, all of that kind of stuff, and they coordinate with us in the field. We have a social media team that just handles social media. That's a whole nother topic we could talk about for hours and hours. But basically the only social media that we control here in the field is one Twitter account. The @FBI Jackson is controlled here in the Jackson field office, but everything else, Facebook, Instagram, Flickr, whatever else you can think of, those are all managed up in DC by a team of folks. We also have internal communications. Of course, they're, doing all the stuff about what's going on within the FBI. We have the .gov unit that manages the website. So if you go to FBI.gov, every field office has their own page with multiple pages from there. Our .gov unit up at headquarters manages all of that for us, which is nice because that's just one more thing on our plate that we have to deal with here in the field. The Community Relations Unit, I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but they do basically all of our community outreach on a broad scale. And then within the field offices, we have our own community outreach strategies. And the Executive Writing Unit, of course, they're writing speeches and those types of things, congressional testimony, all that type of stuff for the director and FBI executives. This is where it gets kind of confusing. So I do not work for the Office of Public Affairs as the Public Affairs Officer. I work in coordination with them, and most of the time what they say goes, right? But at the end of the day, I work directly for my boss here in Jackson. Of course, our headquarters has a lot of say in what we do and what we say, but at the end of the day, I work for my boss here. So up in DC, there's approximately 100, give or take, public affairs assets within the Office of Public Affairs. So it is rather large, and it's somewhat robust up there. But of course, here in the field offices, there's not nearly as many people, and I'm going to get into that in just a few minutes. But at least every field office, all 56 field offices, has at least one person who kind of handles public affairs stuff. So here in Jackson, we have one. It's me. So now I'm going to kind of line out, take it to a smaller scale, talk a little bit about the FBI in Mississippi, and then I'll narrow down from there into the FBI Public Affairs in Mississippi. So the FBI in Mississippi, our office officially opened June the 10th, 1964. J. Edgar Hoover himself actually came to Jackson and hosted the opening ceremony. It was shortly after the 3 civil rights workers went missing over in Neshoba County. And that's kind of what drove the office opening here. Something that's actually pretty interesting, our office over on Echelon Parkway is actually named for those 3 civil rights workers and the special agent in charge at the time. It's the only federal building, to my knowledge, that's named after someone who was killed in an FBI investigation. So kind of an interesting story there. Our office opened here, I believe, in 2009. So we've been there in that office. We used to be downtown in the federal building, but now we're up off of Echelon Parkway, kind of up there by Entergy headquarters. Like I said, that's where our headquarters office is here in Jackson. It's right there on kind of County Line Road and Echelon Parkway, so you could throw a rock and hit Ridgeland, but we're technically in the city of Jackson. We have 7 satellite offices around the state, 1 in South Haven, Oxford, Columbus, Meridian, Hattiesburg, Gulfport, and Pascagoula. I can't tell you exactly how many employees we have. I can tell you it's about 170 statewide, but we start getting into some of those details and that information does get classified. So I'm not allowed to tell you all those numbers. But we have here in Jackson, our director, the person who's kind of in charge of the state of Mississippi, is the special agent in charge. Her name is Michelle Sutphin. She's been here about a year. And she's the first female special agent in charge of the FBI in Mississippi. So kind of a historic thing for her and for our office. She's a phenomenal person. She's not on this call, so she can't hear me talking good about her. So I'm not getting any brownie points. That's not what this is about. No, she's a great leader. She's very engaged and involved in public affairs, which is sometimes nice, sometimes not when you're talking about the boss. But she has great ideas and great direction. So I love having her here. The typical lifespan of a special agent in charge is generally about 2 years. And then they're going to either promote or retire, because once they get to that level, they've been in the Bureau for going on 20 plus years. And that's about their retirement time. So she'll probably be here another year. She claims she'll be here longer, but that's what they all say. But she, we'll probably have her another year, and then we'll have another special agent in charge. I've been here 4 years, and she's my 3rd special agent in charge. So that's about typical for the FBI way. The only thing constant is change. That's what we always say. We also have 2 assistant special agents in charge. Those are like the 2 deputies, deputy director, however you want to look at it. One covers our criminal side of the house, and the other one covers the national security side of the house. So that's generally how we break up the types of investigations or violations that we do, whether it's terrorism, counterintelligence, cyber. Those would all fall on the national security side of the house. And then when we start talking about criminal, you're talking violent crime, crimes against children, public corruption, healthcare fraud, those types of things. So those would fall on the criminal side of the house. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those investigations and maybe pique some of your interest on some of those here in just a few minutes. And here in Mississippi, all those things that I mentioned earlier, civil rights, cyber, counterintelligence, all that, we do all that right here in Jackson. People don't think that you know, there's people trying to get into computer systems and stuff here in Mississippi, and it happens. I'm sure you've all gotten emails about all types of different things. You owe money. You're getting calls about your vehicle's extended warranty. All of those types of things are things that we could potentially investigate. So yeah, there's a lot going on that people have no idea about. So now let's move into the public affairs and kind of how we're structured here in Mississippi. So you're looking at the entire public affairs team here in Mississippi. It's just me. So what do I do, right? What all can you do? I mean, it's just the FBI. There's not much going on, right? Well, I deal anything with the media or the public. So if I tell people all the time, if it's outside of our fence line, it's my responsibility. So that definitely keeps me busy, as you can imagine. I also do community outreach. Well, what does that mean? Anytime we're reaching out to any civic organization, religious organization, nonprofit organization, We do different outreach to youth and teens about different things that they can be looking out for, different threats against them. We do a whole thing called Citizens Academy. Some of you may have heard of that. I know Chuck has actually gone through Citizens Academy, and there may be some others. I haven't looked at the list of everyone who's here, but that's a class that we put on where we bring people in from the community, religious, civic, and business leaders from our community, and we teach them about what the FBI does. It's a little more in depth than what I'm doing here today. You're getting probably an hour or so of me, and this class lasts about 9 weeks, meets once a week. If anybody's interested in it, I'm the coordinator of it. I can probably get you in. I know the guy. So just let me know. I'll be happy to work with you. It is somewhat competitive because we generally have about 30 slots. This year may be different with COVID, but we generally have about 30 slots and only about, I normally get about 60 to 80 nominations for those 30 slots. So it is competitive, but if you're interested in it, let me know. We'll be happy to put you on the list. I also do congressional affairs. So anything to do with Congress, having questions about FBI investigations or things going on here in Mississippi, that's something that I coordinate with our executive management as well. As it stands today, I'm the acting photographer. We do have a full-time position for a photographer. However, our photographer retired in November, I believe, and we are hiring someone who's in background. If you know anything about the FBI, you know that we are slow. We really don't do very much fast, especially the background check process. For my process to get hired on, it took about 12 months from the time that I applied until the day that I walked in the door. So that's just something that that happens. So our photographer is in background, and of course, COVID has now slowed everything down, just like I'm sure all of you are well aware. I maintain our internal website. So we have a internal website for the FBI in general, and Jackson has our own part of that, and I maintain that on the internal side. So it's something else. We just did a complete redesign. It was good during COVID because as far as we went, media stuff was kind of slow. We were dealing with some fraud issues related to COVID, but outside of that, things had slowed way down for us. So I was able to kind of redesign our entire website. And then I also assist with recruiting. So one of the things I travel around, we do have a full-time recruiter, but I travel around with her, talk to different groups about the different positions we have, specifically the special agent position, because we are almost always hiring in that position. If you're interested in being a special agent, if anybody has questions about that, I'll be happy to answer those at the end of the presentation. So what does a typical day look like for me? Does anybody have any idea what a typical day would look like? It's probably just like all of you. No day is typical, right? You think today I'm going to walk in and do A, B, and C. And by the time you leave, you haven't done A, B, or C. That's generally how my day goes. I'm driving to work in the morning going, I'm going to handle this problem, that problem, and another. And as soon as I walk in the door, there's a dumpster fire and I'm having to deal with that. So that's just the way it is. And in the PR business, I think all of you understand that, and you deal with it on a daily basis, just like I do. So just to give you an idea, one day I may be dealing with some violent crime initiative where we're, trying to take guns off of felons and arrest people for drug issues or whatever it is. The next day I'm dealing with some terrorism issue where somebody was making threats against an elected official or something like that. And then the next day is something to do with healthcare fraud. It literally ranges to opposite ends of the spectrum in 24 hours or less. So it's a constant struggle and a constant juggling act to just keep up with all the moving parts of what we're doing, the FBI is doing, big FBI is doing. We get questions here locally about, things that people are saying in DC, and those get tricky. So it's just a constant juggling act trying to keep up with it. Another thing that I have to do pretty much on a daily basis, we have a 63-page media policy, 63 pages, and it's just on media. So I have to be the subject matter expert on that policy. A lot of what it's outlining is for our employees and their interaction with the media. If you haven't been living under a rock for the last 3+ years, you know that the FBI has had some different issues. And there's been people who talk to the media, so they've clamped down very, very hard on that. So basically now there are only a handful of people who are authorized to speak to the media at any given time. In our field office, there are 2 people, myself and the special agent in charge. Everyone else has to have prior approval before speaking to the media. Now, if investigating or needing to talk to media about an investigation, whole different process. Now you're pulling in Department of Justice, who is kind of our mother agency. Completely, totally different process now. So it's a much more longer, arduous process to get that approved by the Attorney General and others. So, but that's outside of the normal daily discussion, right? We're talking about answering media questions about different investigations and things like that. So I also, pretty much on a daily basis, I'm executing our media and/or community outreach strategy. We try to keep up with emerging trends, what's important, what are we seeing. If we're seeing a specific type of fraud, we can try to head that off and get people, updated or knowledgeable about it so they can protect themselves. So there's always something in that aspect. We're always asking for tips about things, whether somebody who's stealing money from the church or whatever it is. So that's pretty much a constant battle there. I get lots of questions internally. Do you think this would be a good idea to talk to the media about this? Or our executives are trying to work on some kind of project. So I do a lot of research. A lot of times, generally people will come to me and say, hey, how many times has this case been mentioned in the media? So doing some analysis of different media stuff. So, I mean, that's pretty regular. I coordinate meetings and briefings for the public and our partners. So anytime we're going to talk to any of these different groups, if we're bringing in business executives or Citizens Academy graduates or something like that, I'm going to coordinate those meetings, get the speakers lined up, contact everyone, tell them where and when and what time and all that kind of fun stuff. And then, of course, pretty much on a daily, if not daily, weekly basis, I'm coordinating with our different law enforcement partners, whether it's the United States Attorney's Office, who prosecutes all of our cases. If I'm talking to Mississippi Attorney General's Office, which a lot of the cases overlap. And then, you go down from there, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, all the different state law enforcement agencies, all the way down to every county and city, local jurisdiction. We coordinate with them if there's a case that overlaps or something where we're going to make a media announcement. They may have been involved or helped with the arrest or the search warrant or whatever it is. So it's a constant, pretty much communication between our office and whoever assisted to make sure that everybody's getting named and getting the credit for the work that they did. So that tells you a little bit about what I do day to day. So now let's do some fun stuff. So I wanted to talk about a couple of recent big media things that I've had to deal with. There are several that I can't talk about, so I'll go ahead and tell you that. You're welcome to ask questions towards the end. If there's a case you want to know about, I'll answer as much as I can, but I'm going to go ahead and warn you that a lot of stuff, we're really bound on what we can say, but feel free to fire away and ask. So let's talk about a couple of recent big cases that we had and the type of things that I had to do for it. So if you all remember, a few weeks ago, there was a 14-year-old boy that went missing up in Alcorn County. He walked away from a residential treatment facility there. He had been diagnosed with autism. He had, I'm trying to remember, he had several medical issues, and he walked away. We got involved 6 days later, which is not optimal, but it is what it is. So I asked the agent that was in charge of that investigation, and I said, how hard do you want me to go on media? We can go full court press where, we roll out everything that we have, or we can, take it light and just kind of see what happens. He said, well, we don't have any leads. We have no idea where this kid could be. It's been 6 days. We need to go full court press. Got it. So Immediately got a missing persons poster generated. There was one already floating around, but when people see an FBI missing person poster, they generally will kind of raise an eye and look at it a little bit. So we got that made up and started pushing that out to the media. We wrote the general press release about our involvement and kind of here's the kid we're looking for. Here's his name. We have no idea where he could be. He had 6 days lead time on us. So he could have been, my phone's ringing. This is about the 4th time. So I'm sorry. That's just my life. Anyway, he had 6 days, so he could have really been to California or to China by then. So who knows where he could have been. So we started doing digital billboards. We have partnerships with Lamar Advertising and some of the others around the country. So we started pushing digital billboards with his face all over the country. We put the information on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere you can think of. I reached out to 21 field offices, mainly in Texas, up to Kansas City, and then like across to Charlotte and everything south of that. Because I figured he could be anywhere in the Southeast by this point. So reached out to 21 field offices, to their public affairs folks, and asked them to push the information out to their local media as well. So we kind of pushed this as far and wide as we could. And within about 48 hours, we received a call that they had found him. And initially they thought that he had died. He was laying at the edge of a creek, about 8 miles from the facility that he left, but he was alive. So the lady who found him, I don't know if you've all heard the story, but he had gone missing. She had heard the news, and she decided to go search her property. Well, they didn't find anything. So a couple of days later, she saw the renewed interest now that the FBI is involved. She saw it on Facebook, and she decided to go search her property again. And that's when she found him. So she kept saying she felt in her heart that she needed to search her property, and she found him. Had it been another 24 hours or so, the outcome would have been a lot different. But as far as I know, the last I heard, he's doing well. He's back with his family, and it's a good story. But the Office of Public Affairs was credited with assisting with finding that young man. So I'll take that as a feather in my hat. It was a couple of days of some crazy phone calls and work, but all worth it in the end to find him alive. The next few things I won't be able to go into as much detail, but I can just tell you kind of some of the things that I've had to deal with in the last year or so. If you have seen the news this week, we have a huge, and when I say huge, I mean huge, healthcare fraud case going on, and it involves fraud against TRICARE, which is the military insurance company, where they were basically some folks were billing for this special type of cream. A compound pharmacy has to make it. It's extremely expensive. Most of the patients didn't need it. Some of the doctors never even saw the patients. It's over $500 million in fraud. There's been multiple people that have been arrested, indicted, sentenced, but there's a lot more going on with that. So I can't go into much more detail than that, but you can find a lot of information about it. And it originated right here in Mississippi. Last I heard, that case now spans 22 FBI offices around the country. So it's huge, and it started right here in good old Mississippi. This was back end of last year. I think it actually happened in 2018, but there were some guys down in Covington County that thought it would be a good idea to burn a cross in the neighborhood of a young African-American who they didn't like for whatever reason. And so they made a cross and they set it on fire in his front yard. Terrible idea. Both of them have been sentenced, and I believe the main guy is going to do 20 plus years in federal prison for that. So civil rights is probably our top criminal priority. It's still Mississippi. So we take it very seriously. Civil rights is not a joke, and it's not something that we take lightly. So there's been several major civil rights cases, and there's several that are ongoing. Wasn't too long ago, we seized 114 pounds of methamphetamine down on the coast. That was a huge drug trafficking case that we worked, where the drugs were coming out of Mexico and into the United States. And they got intelligence about this truck, and it was at a truck stop there in Harrison County, and they got 114 pounds of meth and I think 2 pounds of heroin, which is a lot of drugs, especially here in Mississippi. So that's just one of our criminal cases down on the coast. There was a Ponzi scheme. I don't know if you heard about it. It was something to do with like trees or something. That was our case here in Jackson. It was a pretty big deal. I think there's still parts of that are ongoing, so I can't really go into much detail on it, but it was one of the largest Ponzi schemes in Mississippi to date. Millions of dollars that were schemed from people, different investors, and I believe the main conspirator there has actually been sentenced. And one of my favorite cases, and this one was just one of my favorites simply because I got to do a lot of research on this, but our agents got information from the Louisiana State Police. This was a couple of years ago. They had arrested a guy with some cocaine over in Louisiana, and he was from Mississippi. So they said, hey, would y'all mind going and doing a search warrant at this guy's house to see if there's more drugs there? Because they had like 8 kilos of cocaine. And they're like, yeah, that's probably a pretty good idea. So they go to this guy's house, and they, of course, find a lot of things that are bad. One of them was nearly a kilo of what they thought was cocaine. So they sent it off for testing, and it came back that it was not cocaine, it was fentanyl. If you know anything about fentanyl, fentanyl is what they're using now to either lace or improve, if that could be a word, heroin, because it's more potent than heroin. So a much smaller amount can get them high. So fentanyl is something, but it's very deadly. If you use just the smallest fraction too much, it will kill you. It was what it was nearly a kilo of fentanyl, which is about 416,000 lethal doses. It could kill nearly 14% of Mississippi's population. Pretty big deal for us. It was good getting that off the street. And then, of course, they found a lot of other things, guns and marijuana, and they did actually find some cocaine and other things. So as you can see, everything is just something different on a daily basis for me. If you go to FBI.gov and you navigate your way through to the Jackson page, there is a whole page of news releases. You can see what all we deal with. One of the major initiatives we've been working on, and you'll see a lot of press releases, is Project Eject. And that is a U.S. Attorney's Office initiative where they are going after felons in possession of a firearm to try to help get rid of some of the violent crime in Mississippi. But there's a ton of press releases there. You're welcome to go read them. I didn't write them all, so don't judge them too much. I did write some of them, but my name is on every one of them, whether I wrote it or not. But I can tell you that I didn't write all of them. So the last thing that I'll tell you, and this is a quote that it's from a New York Times columnist, Maureen Dowd, if you've ever heard of Maureen. But our former assistant director of public affairs, who's now retired, used this quote one time in talking about the media, and it kind of stuck with me because it's very true. And the quote is, "Wooing the press is roughly akin to picnicking with a tiger. You might enjoy the meal, but the tiger always eats last." It's something that really stuck with me because how true is that we can put on the greatest dog and pony show for the media and or the public, but at the end of the day, the media is going to make their own determination and they're going to say what they want to say. And at that point, there's not a whole lot that you can do to change it. You can come out and try to change it and try to work with them. But so that's just something that I'll leave you with. Let's see, there were a couple of questions. Let's see. So what triggers the FBI to get involved in a drug case? So there are several things. Generally speaking, if you see the FBI going after drugs, it's either that they were crossing state lines, so what we call interstate commerce, where they're basically trafficking the drugs, or a lot of times we will use drug statutes to arrest and dismantle gangs. I tell folks all the time, it's not illegal to be in a gang. You can be in whatever gang you want to be in. Y'all could change your name to the Public Relations Gang of Mississippi, and there's nothing illegal about it. What makes it illegal is the activities that the gangs participate in. So if they're dealing drugs, if they're out shooting at people and that type of thing, that's what makes it illegal. So we can't go and arrest a bunch of people for being in a gang, but generally speaking, some of these gangs, not all of them, some of these gangs have no good intentions. And they are part of the reason that there is violent crime in different communities. So it's one of those things that we're going to try to dismantle that gang from the top down. And a lot of times we can go after them on drug charges. So the FBI does have the capability to arrest for drugs and things like that. So it's definitely something that we go after somewhat regularly. Let's see, I'm looking through some of these other questions. Lots of thanks. Yep. Citizens Academy grad. Hey, Paula, how are you? Yep. Citizens Academy is a lot of fun. It's a good class. Brenda. Hey, Brenda, how are you? Good to see you. Well, I can't see you, but let's see. Samantha. Sometimes social conversation can dominate how an agency business responds to certain issues or how it communicates during a certain time. Yeah, it's tough. The good thing for me here in Jackson is you start talking about some of these larger topics, and I'll give you some examples. The George Floyd death investigation, all of the COVID stuff, just some broad examples. But you start talking about national picture stuff where the FBI is looking at things that on a large scale or a big level. We do get a lot of guidance about that down not only from FBI headquarters, but from the Department of Justice and even the White House saying, do this, don't do that, say this, don't say that. So there is some guidance on what we do and how we do it. Now, when you start talking here locally, we do try to keep a good pulse on, what is the community feeling? What's the level? Is there any unrest? And we try to work through that. So we have strategic partnerships with different organizations and entities that we can work with and go, hey, we're seeing this issue. Can y'all help us message this? Or can you talk to your congregation or to your organization and ask them, what are their concerns? Is there something that we can go ahead and iron out now? Or is there something that we need to be looking into? Part of my job is to do that and say, what are we lacking? What are we missing in the community versus what are their concerns that we can go ahead and solve now? Social conversation, especially social media. Gosh, social media is such a pain. And I'm sure all of y'all deal with the same problem. People get behind a computer and they just want to say whatever they want to say and do whatever they want to do. And we have a lot of issues with that. Now, granted, I don't pay too much attention to chatter as far as what people are saying about us because people can say what they want to say. Everybody has that right. But for me, what I kind of keep tabs on is when people start making threats, not only against the FBI, but they start making threats against other people or other organizations. That's when it turns into an issue, and that's when we kind of start to act on it. So kind of a loaded question, Sam, but a good one. No, I appreciate it. Does anybody else have anything? Y'all can unmute and ask. I'm happy to answer whatever I can. Wow, riveting crowd here today.
Brett, what's something that you wish everybody knew about the MBI that you probably say over and over and over again that you could tell our group where we could maybe be supportive or better informed?
Regardless of what you hear about the FBI, and there's been a lot of talk about us for the last 3 or 4 years, regardless of what you hear, we have a phenomenal group of people, 37,000 employees, and the large majority wants to do the right thing. Have we had some issues with different people in the past? If you haven't been living under a rock, you know that there's been different things that have happened and maybe not handled the right way. But the overwhelming majority of the FBI is a good group of people. It's a fantastic place to work. We have some great leaders, great supervisors. It's the federal government. I mean, you know, we kind of cater to everybody, and your strengths can always be used in some way. So I love every day of my job. There's always something different to deal with. But, you know, I tell folks all the time, regardless of what you hear from different folks and different people, overwhelmingly, the FBI is a fantastic place to be. People call all the time and they're like, or I'm trying to recruit one of my friends to come be an agent or whatever. And they're like, you know, it's the FBI. I'm not really interested. Y'all are crazy. And I'm like, dude, but you don't know what it's really like inside the doors. I mean, it's totally different. And what happens up in certain places does not affect what we do here, right? So we have a specific set of priorities and duties to do here within the confines of the state of Mississippi. And we're not going to let that affect what we do here. So the main thing is, overwhelmingly, we have a great group of folks who all want to do the right thing. So that's generally what we try to do on a daily basis. What else? Come on. I got like another 24 minutes.
Brett, I have a question. How long have you been there?
I started, my first day with the Bureau was May the 31st, 2016.
Okay. So what changes have you seen in your organization, if any? Wait, hold on. When the presidential administration changes, does it?
So generally speaking, it doesn't change much with a presidential change. Now, of course, we had a little bit of a change from Director Comey to Director Ray. Finn, sorry, enough. Sorry, my dog apparently didn't want me to talk about that. No, the male person's here. But so generally speaking, there's not much change with a change in president. Now, you may have different priorities coming down from the Department of Justice because the Attorney General sees something as being more important than something else. So we may shift a little bit priority-wise, but as far as overall, the FBI is apolitical, right? So what we try to do on a daily basis is maintain that apolitical stature and not get involved on one side or the other. So generally speaking, there's not much change in our posture following a presidential election. However, there is a little bit of shift in priority. You know, we went from when President Obama was in office, which was only a short time of my tenure, our priority fell a lot on different things like civil rights and stuff like that. And of course, now we've kind of shifted more to violent crime and different things. So we still have our FBI priorities, the things that we're going to do on a daily basis, whether, you know, John Smith or Sarah Smith is in the White House. That's not going to matter to us. We're going to protect the United States from a terrorist attack. That's priority number one. And then really everything else falls under that. Post 9/11, the whole terrorism thing kind of took charge, and everything else now kind of falls under that. So we work on a daily basis to try to maintain our priorities, and it's a little bit different everywhere you look. So even here in Jackson, our priorities are a little bit different than maybe what they have at headquarters. Headquarters says, you know, these are our 3 priorities, and Jackson's like, well, civil rights is really more of a thing here, so we're going to put that kind of up high, and we've got all this healthcare fraud stuff, so we're going to stick that up pretty high. And so, but to answer your question, it changes a little bit. As far as my job, it doesn't change much at all. We're gonna continue to do and message what we do, no matter who's running the show. So, good question. Not one I was prepared for. So, kudos to you. What else?
Brad, if I could make a pitch for the Citizens Academy, I went into it not knowing really what to expect because I don't know much about the FBI going in. And from the first night, to the last night when we got to blow up things and shoot things. It was a great experience, and you got a chance to see just how professional these guys and these ladies are, and it really opened my eyes a lot. So I would recommend to anyone who is interested to look into it.
It's a lot of fun. It's a class that you come one night a week, couple hours, 3 hours, and you get to learn about all the different things. We talk about certain things that are a little more in depth because you're inside of our space, and we can talk a little bit more about some of the threats and things. But the purpose of it is to build a community that understands what we do. You know, back in the 60s, 70s time frame, the FBI was a bunch of guys in suits with dark sunglasses, and we didn't want you to know anything about what we did. Well, that's kind of changing, right? I mean, we want people to understand what we do. We want people to understand what the threats against them and their organizations are, so they can protect themselves. Because once, for instance, ransomware. Once ransomware gets into your computer network, there's pretty much nothing that can be done. 99% of the time, it's overseas. We're never going to catch the guys because they're in a country that we don't have that type of relationship with. And once it happens, it happens. So if you can protect yourself on the front end, and you can learn about the different types of things that you can do to make sure that doesn't happen. It's just like when grandma and grandpa get the phone call at 2 a.m. that their grandson is in jail, and they need to wire, $5,000 right now. So they get up and they do it right now. And the next morning they call, their son or daughter and say, well, John called last night, said he was in jail in New Jersey. And of course they're like, John was sleeping in the room right next door to us. He's not in New Jersey. Once that money goes, it's gone, right? Once it gets wired out of the country, there's no getting it back. So part of the Citizens Academy is to educate people on those types of things and what we do, but we have some fun too. We go out to our shooting range, and you get to shoot some FBI weapons, and our bomb techs generally come and blow something up. And if we do it in Hattiesburg, they get lots of 911 calls. Sorry, Samantha. Because people think that Hattiesburg's being invaded because there's 9 or 10 bombs that go off. But, it is a lot of fun. I encourage you, like I said, if you're interested, reach out to me. I'll be happy to give you information on how you can be a part of it. So thanks, Chuck. Other questions?
Hey, Brett, it's Leela.
Hey.
You talked about this just a little bit, but unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, our experience typically with the FBI is what we see on television and in the movies. Mm-hmm. So can you elaborate a little bit on what are some of the biggest myths that we see there that you have to try to tamp down?
So probably the first thing is, and there's several, but we joke about it all the time. You see in the movies where the FBI shows up at a bomb, and we walk up and we tell the local police or the sheriff's officer, whoever, hey, we're here from the FBI. Hold on, I'll show you something. I got to get it out of my pocket. I got like 18 things in my pocket. But we generally walk up and we go, hey, I'm here from the FBI, and we'll take this scene so you can move along. That's really not at all how it works. We generally are coming in to investigate federal crimes. So a lot of times we want to work with our state and local partners because there are additional charges that they could bring against someone. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily rise to the federal level. So we're there in an assisting capacity, like with the missing child up in Alcorn County. There was really no federal law violation there, but we have additional assets that we can bring in to assist. So we didn't walk into the sheriff's office that morning and say, we're here from the FBI, Sheriff, we got this. Y'all can go home now. So that's kind of myth number one, that we're all a bunch of, excuse my French, but we're all a bunch of a-holes and we just kind of run and take things over. Not at all how it works. So that's one thing. Number two, our technology is not as great as what Hollywood says it is. We do have some really cool stuff. Don't get me wrong. We have some really cool, crazy stuff that I can't even tell you about, right? So there is some stuff that you're like, wow, we're the FBI. We got some pretty cool stuff. But on the flip side of that, like our day-to-day computers are fantastic. Our common saying is yesterday's technology today. I couldn't even print. I wrote out like some little note talking points. I couldn't even print them at the office because our printers were down. So that's one thing. Our technology, like to get into our building, we don't have retina scanners and all that kind of stuff. So those are just a couple of things. But the biggest myth that we have to kind of get everybody's head, especially local law enforcement folks that have never worked with us before, when they come in or when we come in to assist them for whatever reason, they're always like, the FBI's here. And there's a lot of folks that think, the FBI, I don't have much for them. But at the end of the day, we're not going to just come in and take something over because we can. We're going to try to work with everybody to keep a good relationship. And we actually have worked really hard at that over the last probably 10 years in Mississippi at just building strong relationships with state and local law enforcement, because at the end of the day, we're all in the fight together, right? We just want to catch the bad guy and put him in jail or serve them a dose of justice. So however we can do that, it doesn't matter whether we do it, they do it, or we do it jointly. So that's the big thing. Good to see you, by the way. She was one of my college professors. Yeah, that's pretty full circle here. Oh, she typed a cool message too, but we have to save that one, hang it up on the wall. Anyway, what else? Anything? I learned more than 0.0001 from you, so I learned more from you in 2 semesters than I did. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Well, if anybody has anything else, let me give you my email address so everybody has it. You're welcome to email me anytime. It's bcarr, C-A-R-R, @fbi.gov. It's really hard to remember. bcarr@fbi.gov. You're welcome to email me anytime. If there's something I can help with or answer a question, I will try to do everything that I can. I'll bend over backwards to help you. I know what it's like to be sitting somewhere and need help or need something and you can't get in touch with anybody. So I generally try to answer email and my phone all the time. I'm on call 24/7. So my phone's been ringing nonstop since I've been doing this. So hopefully nothing blew up. We'll just leave it at that. Hopefully it's just something stupid. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking time, and especially since you had to run home, makeshift office, deal with your dog, phone calls at home. But
it's all right. I got to see the kids, so it was worth it.
There you go. Well, we have a little happy for you. Obviously, I cannot present it to you at this moment, but you'll get it, a little gift card virtually. I guess staying safe in that way, but we appreciate it. And 2 things you mentioned, when you mentioned something about a photographer job, you're saying, is that something that is available now, or you're saying?
They've already done the interviews and selected the candidate. It's just that person now is in the background check process.
Okay, that's what you said about the background. Okay. I caught that, but I'm sorry. Just wanted to double check, as I was just bringing up earlier, that's the big hot commodity right now is people looking for communications positions. So
I will say, as far as the public affairs world goes in the FBI, it is kind of hard to break into. Like I was telling you, our 37,000 employees, there's only about 150 public affairs folks.
Yeah.
So it's a much smaller group of folks, but there are positions from time to time. A lot of times you may have to be willing to move. But if you're interested in, moving to Seattle or DC or somewhere else, let me know. I'll be happy to kind of keep you in the loop if a position opens up, if you're interested in that. I'll be happy to push that y'all's way. Now, one thing I will tell you, I should have mentioned this. We have ethics rules. So just hang on to your gift card and give it to somebody else, because I can't take those types of gifts.
Gotcha.
So it's fine. I really do greatly appreciate it, but our ethics folks will come after me and I don't want to deal with them. So Yeah.
Well, maybe when
Just-
the meeting comes back up at Capitol Club, we can just have you at a meeting.
I'll be happy to come
About that.
and do something else, talk to you, or come in and have lunch with y'all.
All right. Whenever that might be.
Yeah, right.
Well, we really appreciate it, and we appreciate all of you jumping on. Anybody have any last thing before we end? Any announcements, comments, concerns, final questions that popped in your head? All right. Well, in that case, thank y'all so much, and have a great rest of y'all's day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.